الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Bien, ce sera un dernier propos.
Very good. A very last speech in French in order to actually pay tribute to Brussels and one of its national languages. First of all, I would like to say this in this very last speech and in this closing speech. I would like by starting with thanking a couple of people. This is the first time that we organize this annual conference outside Qatar, so I would like by thanking on your behalf the members, the staff of the European Muslim Network, because they have actually been our partner in organizing this conference here in Brussels. Dr. Hamidi, Noura, Sarah, the whole team, people who worked at the forefront, people who worked behind the scene. When you meet them on your way out, do thank them for the very hard work that they did in order to organize this conference. And we would like to apologize for what happened yesterday morning, because obviously this had a negative impact on the answer and question time, but many people had actually registered, didn't appear, others who did appear but hadn't registered, and the conditions in which you could attend the conference being extremely strict. We had a full house, so to speak, in terms of registration, but we didn't have a full house in reality. I would also like to thank the team of the center, the Research Center of Islamic Legislation and Ethics, and our Master of Ceremony did things brilliantly, and he made sure that things would happen the way they were supposed to happen. Karen Armstrong used to say that there is a Muslim time, which means, I suppose in other words, that we are not particularly punctual. That's how I take it. Yes, I know. I mean, this is a habit of ours. I mean, we never manage to manage time properly, and that's not always a good thing. But I would like to thank Dr. Hali and Dr. El Khatib, whom you've just heard, Badi, who was the person who worked with the European Muslim Network here in order to make sure that the live stream and the quality of the images be proper. Fatima, who is one of our partners in charge of communication, didn't obtain a visa, so couldn't be with us, and Dr. Mohammed, who from Qatar dealt with the organization. And then people who have been particularly instrumental in all this, the advisory board. I mean, we do work with a group of people. They are the advisory board, and our brother Lazhar, who is a researcher and has been particularly instrumental in all this. I would also like to thank you, the participants. Let me tell you something. Well, first of all, you were here. You've been extremely patient, and the attendance was really something that we value, and also the quality of your questions. Some people did complain yesterday by saying, well, we didn't have enough time for questions and answers, but the quality of the questions that you put forward was absolutely brilliant, and it's so important for us. So I would like to thank you, the participants, and you have to realize that thousands of people did actually follow us on live stream, and we would like to thank them for being with us yesterday and today, and to thank them for their patience yesterday. And I would also like to thank the interpreters, as we are virtually closing this conference. I would like to thank our team of interpreters. And I'm saying this because I'm sure it hasn't been easy for them. And translating into English and French what our friend here says in Arabic, well, that is quite an exercise. They did their best, and we would like to thank them. And we would also like to thank everybody who was involved. Security, safety, well, that's very important these days. Some are trying to actually be safe when we are with them, but we do the same. We try to be safe wherever. So thank you to the security guards as well. I would also like to thank Professor David Vines, who was with us and did the trip in order to be with us. Thank you for having contributed in financial and economic terms, and in terms also of the economic reform that we need. You also could listen to Edwy Plenel. He wasn't with us physically, but I'm sure that you've actually valued what he says. I mean, we've not invited people because they are our friends. What we want to hear is for people to call upon our responsibility. This is exactly what our friend said, a woman who's always been questioning what we do. Professor Karen Armstrong, maybe she's not as well known in the French-speaking world. She's extremely well known in the English-speaking world. She actually wrote a book on the Prophet and a lot of books on religion. So do remember that what she is saying to us actually is that from a certain point in time, we have to actually look at the Hijrah and the Exodus, the exile. I mean, we have to be aware of our efforts, because she used the word jihad, so that we sweat before we hasten to answer, because that was the key of her message. So it is about making an effort, and she did say this very clearly. Thank you for this very clear message, Professor. You've now spent 2 days reflecting on things, and you've been able to see that, whether it was in the last session or in the previous sessions, that inside the center debate, there is a debate. We don't always agree on everything. We question positionings, we question ideas. I mean, we don't have one-size-fits-it-all debate. We do have internal debates, and we've seen this in the last few days. I mean, sometimes we beg to differ, but the only legitimate thing is that we have to respect one another in the answers that we provide. Questioning is fine, challenging is fine, respecting what other people say is essential. And the other thing that you've been able to see is that we deal with sensitive issues. They are sensitive for many reasons. They are sensitive because sometimes those are issues that are part of our time. It's because we live in this era that they are sensitive, but it also is sensitive because it actually takes us back to the text and to the why we read the text the way we do. And it's also sensitive because it is questioning the unanimity of our thought, or what we thought was unanimous and is not. And it is also sensitive because a certain number of scholars refuse what has been the common understanding of some definitions and some terms. And those are sensitive issues because we question the words, because we question history, and because we question the majority of our opinion, because at some point in time, the public opinion has become a majority because we don't question it. And that's not right. I mean, some things are acquis because we ignore the history that's been ours. For example, sciences. Yesterday, you've seen at some point in time on television, I said, as a Muslim, I have no issue whatsoever with the theory of evolution, to be called a kafir by some people who didn't even know what we're talking about, know nothing about sciences, about scientific hypotheses, but they heard somewhere that there is a Muslim discourse, and that's final. The problem is that if we are ignorant of the text and of the scientific knowledge, then we are in the wrong. And that is what we want to say very clearly. Yesterday, Dr. Ali, Professor Nidhal did talk about a certain number of fundamental scientific issues, the same for Professor Damian. They are actually saying what science says, and that is good. And then we have other opinions, such as the opinion of.
This is what exactly I'm doing right now. That's inshallah. So,
we heard Dr. Iqbal. That is a position that we find among the Muslims. The idea is to actually take into account every position. But understand me properly. I wouldn't like people to think that we only question the texts and their interpretation. No, we also question sciences and their assumptions. That is to say that from a certain point in time, there are scientific data or positions. The objective is not to deny the fact that science exists, but we have to accept that some scientific positions are part of an ideology, and we may not necessarily agree with it. So, and in the last presentation, and I will go back to this later, we have the same debate for the gender issue. And so I would like to thank all the panelists and all those who contributed to the gender issue debate as well. But there has been a second debate, and what I'm trying to do here is not to recap the debates, but I want you to understand that by coming here, I would like to understand better what the responsibilities that we should have are, and the methodologies that we should question. The idea is not to have an audience, and we are being very satisfied because there are many of you here in this room, but the objective of this international conference is to actually circulate a certain movement, intellectual movement that actually questions what we hear and gives a responsibility to individuals. We don't want to have people who are happy to have had a debate. We want to be with people, inshallah, who feel responsible. As to the issue of economics, you've seen yesterday that in one of the debates that we had, we don't even agree on the interpretation of a word. Riba, for example. We don't even agree on the definition. So this actually requires a debate as to the substance. I mean, many scholars agree on the interpretation of the word, but then you've got some people who say, be careful, you have to be very precise. And you've seen for yourself the quality of the expression of the researcher who was with us yesterday. But you have to have a critical debate. You have to reflect upon what has been understood historically. Because, of course, if all scholars agree on one position and there is one scholar who has the needed knowledge and legitimately questions this interpretation, we have to listen to this researcher. Truth is not a question of quantity, it's not a matter of quantity, it's a matter of quality. If one scholar questions the majority of opinions, you can't say he's not right because he's on his own. You have to listen to him to know how he reached those conclusions. And that is a debate that we need. From that viewpoint, we need to listen. When you hear that people worked very hard, are practitioners, and say, as it was the case for Abdelazeem, Abozaid, says, well, we have to be careful because what we are currently doing on behalf of the Muslim economy, we are asking researchers to be judge and party. So what we are doing, in effect, is that we are actually killing the project because of the methodology that we use. Those are critical discourses that are very important. Islamic finance today should be at the substance of our debate, the way it is being thought and the way it is being implemented, the way actually Dr. Mohammed did, because he was saying something very important. He said the issue of the economics is not a matter of methodology. It's not a matter of how you define the terms. It's about the final objective. What is it that we are doing? So what he was saying was, are we simply trying to regulate capital, or are we thinking about the final objective of finance and economics? So let's not be confused about the substance of the debate. All this under the authority of Ibrahim El-Ziaid, who is working in the European Muslim Network with us and actually moderated the discussion. And very rapidly, because that's another responsibility, obviously, and I don't want knowledge to be on this part of the room and all the listening on your part, but what actually Professor Jonathan Brown said this morning, where is this authority is coming from? How come we follow somebody and not somebody else? Often people will follow one scholar because this scholar confirms what they knew before they listened to him. See what I mean? I don't know whether you have the same feeling as I do, but it actually sort of makes me feel uncomfortable, because the authority today in Islam is a real problem. So he was asking the right question this morning. Hence, this issue of responsibility is something that was underlined by Professor Heba. The idea is to say, okay, we can't systematically name and shame those who give to the external authority a power that would be built only on reputation or would be only institutional. What we need is somebody who actually fulfills his obligation of looking for things. Because if at the end of the day we're waiting for the fatwa to come to us, well, nothing will happen. What she said was so important. She said that we have to reflect on the importance of interactions between people. You don't answer to a religious question only with your mind, you have to use your heart also to do that. And that is something that was rightly underlined by our speakers. And you heard what is happening in Europe. When they say to you in Europe that you, the Muslims, you should wake up because you didn't do anything, and you hear that for the last 20 years institutions have been set up, sessions have been organized, this work has been done, you can't say. I mean, I always say this to the journalists, stop saying we did not evolve. You did not evolve in the way you perceive the Muslims, but the Muslims did evolve in the way they answer to those questions, and we did contribute a lot. No, come on. I have a personal fatwa, you see, about applauding me. So it's so important, and we have to say what actually is essential. Dr. Hali was talking, and Dr. Halbi Bashir did the same. They did ask a very important question. This is at the essence of what we do in our center today. We cannot have fatwas that are coming from researchers only on the basis of the text, if they are not familiar with the environment and if they don't have the right knowledge. We have to do this together. And the other thing that is equally important is we, Muslims, we do not have the monopoly of the knowledge of sciences and knowledge and societies. This is not true. So we have to be humble and listen to what some people have to bring to us. And they have things to say. They have to say something in ethical and moral terms. Let me say something. Some scholars are not Muslim scholars, but they are far more ethical than some Muslims I know. So at some point in time, you have to listen. And this is exactly what was underlined this morning by people who are very seasoned scholars in Europe, people who have the experience, and it was good to listen. Let's stop having simplistic political discourses. And this is what was underlined by one of our speakers. And let's use our experience. One thing came out of the debate this morning. We, as Muslims, we can't have a critical mind if we do not think to whom we give the authority and how we negotiate this this, and this is an ethical question too, isn't it? And then, of course, the gender issue. We've seen this afternoon what it means, issues that are particularly important and dear to our heart. And what I take out of this debate, those are genuine issues. And we've seen this between two members of the center. One idea is to say, is the problem in the masculine reading of the text? Is it a matter of cultural interpretation? Is it a matter of methodology? Where is the problem? Today, I don't think. You know where I'm coming from, Switzerland, and you know how people are in Switzerland. They are neutral. But I think both positions make sense. But they're not talking about the same thing. One is talking about culture and the way things are being interpreted culturally, and is talking about the fact that there is something that I have to say here. The cultural element is so important in Islam. It's so nice to see Islam opening up to the cultural elements, but be careful. Culture can actually open your mind up, but it can also close your mind, even if it opens you up to diversity. And in the gender issues, it often closes the mind. But it's not only that. And we have to ask the question of methodology and the instruments that are being used. I think the two are real. And you can't exclude one to the benefit of the other. But we did hear something which is equally important. And maybe we minimized this. You can agree or not with what was said by Nasser Al-Khartam, but there is something which is important, nevertheless. Vis-à-vis the gender issues, in terms of gender issues, you have to recognize that those questions have developed and have evolved. But we have the duty to question the new theories. If somebody says to me, today everything is a cultural construction, well, of course, man is not a man is not a woman. Yes, of course, that's evident. But it also means that not everything is a cultural construction. But you can't say that in the roles, of course, there are social and historical missions. Of course, look how we actually talked about the fact that the text is so complex, culture is so important, the methodology is important, and some theories are being imposed upon us. People would tend to consider that from that viewpoint we do not question those theories. Well, if we don't, that would be a mistake. We have to question the theories as well. And what was said to us is that we have to go further. This is exactly what Dr. Al-Sharmani said, and this is what we heard from Dr. Jamila Moussouli. Those are important elements. Which type of debate are we having internally? And sorry, but you may not agree with some feminist movements, but some questions are so legitimate. A contract of marriage, of matrimony, understood as a commercial contract, well, that's a real issue, isn't it? And the best scholars that we have, Tabari, Al-Ghazali, I mean, their discourse on women will really shake you to the core. But you can't take them out of their environment, of course. You have to take on board their environment in order to say their position on women is far more of a cultural nature than of a Islamic nature. And then you can have a debate. So why are we doing all this? Is it because we want to keep you amused for 2 days? No, not at all. It's because we need to wake up, all of us. And I'm not talking only to the Muslims in this room. I'm talking to the men and the women, whatever their religion. I'm talking to the Muslims, of course, because that's what we are as a center. But I think that altogether we have to ask the right questions. And I don't want anybody who came into this room to think that this debate is happening on this side of the room and not on the other side of the room. Because what Dr. Jabala was saying this morning, he was saying something very important. All the work that was carried out by the European Council is a brilliant work. The problem, and that is not acceptable after 10 years, 15 years, it's not acceptable to see that the work is done in Arabic, not in English. Who is it aiming at? I mean, whom are we working for? For the Arabs? So are we working as Arabs for other Arabs? Is that what it is about? Well, I can say this because I'm Arab, of course. Come on, I mean, it has to be translated. A fatwa, one thing is to formulate it, and the other thing is to translate it and give it to those who have to use it. So that's the work that we have to do. We decided to work in 3 languages because, yes, of course, we have closed circles. Yes, of course, we have seminars where many scholars who are present today work in closed circles. Okay, but that's not in the public eye. That's working on the substance. Then we work with the students. Then we work with the man of the street and the woman on the street. And it's not to keep you amused. The idea is to say that the vision that we have, which is to actually analyze sensitive questions, has one objective. It's because we want to actually question our interpretations and our readings. And the other thing, I think, that was important and was underlined by many is that if it is true that in the field of law, 1/10 is the reading of the text and 9/10 is the fiqh, what does it mean? It means how can you actually realize the raison d'être of a rule? Well, this is our work, your work, my work. And we need people who know what is happening in the field in order to do that, which is why each one of us can contribute to this. And this is what I said yesterday. We have to make sure that rules are being reconciled with the meaning, the objective, the final objective of what we are doing. We have to reconcile the field of knowledge. The rule should be linked to ethics. Ethics should be linked to the objectives. This is exactly, and I would like to remind you of this, that is what Dr. Iqbal has said yesterday. Let's be careful. Our debate should not be static. Our debate should be dynamic in the way history progresses, and this is something we're very sensitive to in our center. What I also said is the interdependency of knowledges. If you do not understand that inside Islam, knowledges are interdependent, and outside Islam, knowledges are interdependent, you may not agree with Professor Yassoun on the question of the evolution, but you can't say to him, listen, Khawf, no, that's not serious. You can't dismiss this person and what he says. He has a scientific position, fine. He is convinced also that not everything that science says is not in opposition with the text. Sometimes our problem is in the way we read the text. Knowledge has to be taken seriously. There is no hierarchy. Somebody who works in the field of medicine, biology, economy, I mean, there is no hierarchy, right? In each knowledge, we have to take what makes it complementary to other knowledges. And it's also about questioning the authorities. Well, a scholar, when he talks about health, he hasn't got the authority. Somebody who is an expert in his field, if his field is not medical, won't have the medical authority. But then, of course, you can work together as authorities. That is something you can do. And if you want to be serious, well, you can't do that. But I think you've understood me. What we do is about the right to question and the duty to respect. This is exactly the example that we wanted to give in our panels. It's called mutual respect, even with humor. Because we have to be able to debate with a sense of humor. I mean, being serious doesn't mean that you can't have the sense of humor. But I can see you smiling even when you don't agree. It makes me feel good. Okay, I shall conclude. I think you've understood very well the spirit in which we organize this conference. It's about having an audience that feels responsible, those who are on the internet, those who are in the room. So don't be passive vis-à-vis this knowledge. We don't have the right. You see, with all the internal crises that we have, with all the things that we hear about Islam, forget about what is being said about Islam in the Western world. Look at what is happening inside our own religion. We cannot be socially passive and culturally passive. We can't afford it. Our crisis is far too profound to actually justify being passive. I would like to invite you, because this is also a work that we decided to carry out, how can we access public opinion? Well, we have a website, we publish works, we work on 11 fields. You can read articles. There are articles that you can send. Be interactive with us, because our public window is to have a site in 3 languages, in French, because obviously this is the main language here, but also in Arabic and in English. Everything we do, we try to do in 3 languages, and let me remind you of this. We want to improve. Maybe you've seen some things you don't like. If there are things to be improved, as the Master of Ceremony reminded you, don't forget to fill in the form, the evaluation form. Give us your opinion. Help us to get better. Those are the last words I wanted to share with you. And on the basis of everything we heard, I would like to thank you all for being present. Thank you to all the panelists. Inshallah, our project is to actually continue those international conferences. In March of next year, we'll be in Kuala Lumpur, inshallah, in Malaysia. No, you are all invited, seriously. You're invited to attend, but as to the air tickets, that is not within our jurisdiction. And of course, if you can't be physically there, we have a live stream. We also have brothers and sisters coming from Kuala Lumpur in order to help us in preparing the next issue, inshallah. God keep you, and stay where you are. I think that our brother has a very last word to say to you. We've been very good, haven't we? We are only 23 minutes late today. This is magnificent. I'll leave the last word to my brother. Thank you.